Wow, I wish I knew this before I chose my class in Baldur's Gate. There are a ton of classes to choose from in Baldur's Gate. One thing I did not take into consideration when choosing my class in the early access version of the game is how my class is going to fit into the party composed of characters I meet along the way. Characters like Astarian, Lae'zel, Gale, Shadowheart, and so on. There are two basic synergies that I wasn't thinking about. Number one was the gear each would be using. For example, I rolled a Druid, and the main drawback of this is that Shadowheart, the Cleric, also relies on Wisdom primarily, just as Druid does. So there is an overlap when it comes to gear with Wisdom. Would I take it for my Druid, or do I give it to my Cleric? This applies to other classes too, but this is the example I ran into. And you could say, just switch out Shadowheart or respec Shadowheart, which is all possible, but if you want to have your party fit together without respecing and just keeping them as is, then you might want to choose a different class. Number two is that you want each party member to be able to fulfill each given role that is important within a party. For example, it's really good to have a character that specializes in dialogue and can succeed in dialogue roles, since if you keep losing those roles, your campaign is probably going to get sidetracked. It's definitely not going to go the route you want, and it might not be as enjoyable. Dialogue roles include things like the intimidation option or persuasion option, both of which are modified by your charisma skill. Characters that do well with dialogue roles are classes that also want to increase their charisma for improved ability checks and improved spellcasting, like Bard, Paladin, Warlock, and Sorcerer. These classes all benefit from charisma by gaining +2 ability checks with charisma. The Warlock, Sorcerer, and Bard also improve their spellcasting through charisma, so it's really a great stat for them, which makes these classes great picks for leading the party in dialogue situations. If we're going off the default characters of Astarian, Lae'zel, Gale, and Shadowheart, none of these party members are great dialogue classes. So I found that it makes a lot of sense to make your character a strong dialogue character. Now, of course, you don't have to do this. You really can play any class you'd like, and I'd recommend that at the end of the day. Just play whatever class you enjoy the fantasy of the most and enjoy the game. But if you want to be able to succeed in dialogue roles consistently from the start, it might not be a bad idea to roll a class that will be primarily utilizing charisma and by consequence will be more likely to succeed in dialogue checks, classes like Bard, Paladin, Warlock, and Sorcerer. There are also companions you meet like Will the Warlock and Minthara the Paladin that you can add to your party that can both perform great in dialogue, so you could definitely go a class that isn't charisma focused, but your party won't have a great dialogue class until you reach Will or Minthara. One other thing to note is that sometimes when in dialogue, your character that is talking is very close to the person that they are talking to. This can be beneficial or detrimental if your character has a high constitution or not. They're likely going to get attacked first if things go south. So keep in mind, maybe a paladin is in fact a great dialogue character because they are ready to take hits if the NPC chooses violence. So we talked about a dialogue character quite a bit. There's also other roles you would want for a well-rounded party, and we talked about it just now. A fighter who has high constitution, who can take hits, be in the front lines, and be able to take some punishment. Classes like fighter, barbarian, paladin, and even ranger/druid with the bear wild shape and the ranger pet. But I think the paladin has great synergy as a tank and dialogue class. You'll of course want a healer/support class. Shadowheart can serve this role as a cleric, or a class like druid or bard. And you'll also want a class with a lot of skill proficiencies for outside of combat, non-combat situations. Things like picking locks, animal handling, sleight of hand, perception. You're going to want these skills in order to disarm traps, perceive those hidden passageways, and just be generally knowledgeable. So classes like rogue, bard, ranger, these will definitely contribute to improving your experience. I think Astarian is a class you can go with right off the bat because he's a rogue, so you could use him. But if you don't want to use him, you could also roll a bard or a ranger yourself to fill this role in the party. And the last role you want is a powerful spellcaster, something like a warlock, wizard, or a sorcerer, a class that is dedicated to dealing massive damage to the enemy from range. This really rounds out the party well by allowing you to have a healer, a tank, a dialogue specialist, a jack of all trades, and a high damage range spellcaster. I think this is a party that will be able to progress through all the content and have a really enjoyable experience. Have you decided which class you're going to play yet? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.